The transport ship Resilience drifted through the void of space, its hull scarred from countless battles across the galaxy. Inside the cramped cargo hold, 23 humans sat in silence, their hands bound with energy shackles that hummed with alien technology. The air was thick with the smell of fear and sweat, but one man seemed completely at ease. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen leaned back against the cold metal wall, his eyes closed as if he were taking a nap on a beach somewhere back on Earth. His uniform was torn and dirty, evidence of the fierce battle that had led to their capture 3 days ago. The other prisoners glanced at him nervously, wondering how anyone could be so calm in their situation. The massive alien that guarded them was unlike anything most humans had ever seen. Standing nearly 9 feet tall, Korthvak belonged to a warrior race called the Vextai, known throughout the galaxy for their brutal efficiency in combat. His thick scaled hide was a deep purple color, and 4 arms extended from his massive torso. Each arm ended in razor-sharp claws that could tear through steel like paper. His head was elongated, with rows of sharp teeth visible whenever he spoke, and 6 glowing red eyes that missed nothing. Korthvak had been bragging for hours about the upcoming gladiatorial games on the prison planet Zarian 7. He took particular pleasure in describing how humans would be forced to fight against creatures from across the galaxy for the entertainment of alien spectators. Most of the prisoners had broken down in tears or pleaded for mercy, which only seemed to amuse the alien warrior more. "Your species is pathetic," Korthvak growled, his voice like grinding stone. "I have fought humans before. You break so easily. No honor, no courage, just weak flesh and weaker spirits." The other prisoners flinched at his words, but Marcus didn't even open his eyes. This seemed to irritate the alien, who stomped over to tower above the relaxed Marine. "You there, human. Are you deaf? Do you not understand that you will die screaming in the arena?" Marcus slowly opened one eye and looked up at the towering alien. Without saying a word, he reached into his torn pocket and pulled out a crumpled pack of cigarettes. 3 remained inside. He selected one with the careful attention of a man who knew these might be his last, then placed it between his lips. Korthvak stared in confusion as Marcus patted his other pockets, searching for something. The Marine's face lit up when he found what he was looking for, a small battered lighter that had somehow survived the battle and their capture. "What are you doing, human?" Korthvak demanded, his forearms crossing over his chest. Marcus flicked the lighter and a small flame danced to life. He touched it to the end of his cigarette and took a long, slow drag. The tobacco glowed orange in the dim light of the cargo hold. He held the smoke in his lungs for a moment, then exhaled slowly, creating a small cloud that drifted toward the alien's face. "Just having a smoke," Marcus said simply, his voice completely calm. "Want one?" The other prisoners stared at him in shock. Here they were, captured by one of the most feared warrior races in the galaxy, destined for a horrible death in alien gladiatorial games, and this Marine was offering their captor a cigarette. Korthvak's red eyes flared with anger. "You mock me, human. Do you not understand your situation? In 3 days, you will be thrown into the arena with creatures that will tear you apart piece by piece. The crowd will cheer as your blood stains the sand. Your bones will be ground to dust and your species will be forgotten." Marcus took another drag from his cigarette, completely unfazed by the alien's threats. He studied Korthvak with the same casual interest he might show a mildly interesting bug. "You know," Marcus said, exhaling another stream of smoke, "I've been thinking about that. You keep talking about how tough you aliens are, how weak humans are. But here's the thing that's been bothering me." He paused to take another drag, making the alien wait. The other prisoners watched in fascination and terror, unsure whether they were witnessing incredible bravery or complete insanity. "If humans are so weak," Marcus continued, "how come it took your entire fleet 3 months to take our outer colonies? We're just one little planet, right? No claws, no natural weapons, no thick hide. Hell, we can't even see in the dark properly." Korthvak's claws extended slightly, a sign of growing agitation. "Your species fights with crude weapons and cheap tricks. There is no honor in your warfare." Marcus chuckled, a sound that somehow managed to be both friendly and deeply unsettling. "Crude weapons? Cheap tricks? You say that like it's a bad thing." He took another drag and fixed the alien with a steady stare. "See, that's where you've got us all wrong. You think strength is about having big claws and thick skin. You think honor means fighting fair. But you know what real strength is?" The alien leaned forward despite himself. drawn in by the human's confidence. Real strength, Marcus said, is being the weakest, smallest, most fragile thing in the universe and still finding a way to win. Real strength is looking at something twice your size with claws that can cut through metal and figuring out how to kill it anyway. He flicked ash from his cigarette, and it drifted slowly to the floor in the low gravity. You want to know why it took you 3 months to beat us? It's because when you have everything to lose and nothing to gain, you fight differently. When you're outgunned, outmanned, and outclassed, you get creative. You stop worrying about playing fair and start worrying about going home. Korthvak's expression had shifted from amusement to something approaching concern. There was something in the human's voice, a quiet certainty that suggested he knew things the alien didn't. And another thing, Marcus added, taking a final drag from his cigarette before dropping it and crushing it under his boot. You keep talking about these gladiatorial games like they're going to be fun to watch. But you know what's going to happen when you put a bunch of desperate humans in a ring with nothing left to lose? He looked up at the alien with a grin that was all teeth and no warmth. You're going to find out why Earth has never been successfully invaded. The prison planet Zirion 7 was a wasteland of red sand and jagged rocks, orbiting a dying star that cast everything in a sickly orange light. The gladiatorial arena rose from the desert like a massive metal flower, its walls reaching toward the sky in defiance of the harsh environment. Thousands of alien spectators filled the seats, their various forms creating a chaotic tapestry of colors and shapes. Marcus and the other human prisoners were herded through underground tunnels that led to holding cells beneath the arena floor. The walls were covered with scratch marks from previous contestants, and the air carried the metallic smell of old blood mixed with fear. Each cell was barely large enough for a single person, with energy barriers that crackled ominously whenever someone got too close. In the cell next to Marcus, a young engineer named Sarah Webb was trying not to cry. She had been part of the technical crew on the research station that Korthvak's forces had overrun. Her hands shook as she stared at the energy barrier that kept her trapped. "This is insane," she whispered. "We're going to die for their entertainment. How is this happening?" Marcus sat cross-legged on the floor of his cell, examining the energy barrier with professional interest. He had been studying it for the past hour, noting how the field fluctuated and where the power conduits ran along the wall. "Sarah," he said quietly, his voice carrying through the thin walls. "You worked on energy systems back at the station, right?" "Yes," she stammered. "Why?" "These barriers. They're powered by external generators, aren't they? The field has to cycle to prevent overheating." Sarah wiped her eyes and forced herself to focus on the technical problem. It was better than thinking about what was coming. She studied the barrier more carefully, her engineering training taking over. "You're right," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "The field drops for maybe half a second every 30 seconds. But that's not nearly enough time to get through." "It is if you know exactly when it's coming," Marcus replied. "And if you're fast enough." 3 cells down, Corporal James Rodriguez overheard the conversation. He had been captured during the same battle as Marcus, though they had been separated during the fighting. Rodriguez was a demolitions expert who had earned his reputation by making bombs out of household items. "Sarge," Rodriguez called out softly, "even if we could get out of these cells, we're still stuck underground with about 1,000 guards between us and freedom." Marcus smiled, though none of the others could see it. "Who said anything about escape?" Before anyone could ask what he meant, heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. Korthvak appeared, flanked by 2 smaller but equally menacing alien guards. The Vextai warrior looked pleased with himself as he surveyed his human captives. "Tomorrow you will provide entertainment for the greatest warriors in the galaxy," he announced. "Tonight you will be fed and given weapons to make the games more interesting. Do not think this is kindness. We simply prefer our sport to last longer than a few seconds." He stopped in front of Marcus's cell, his 6 red eyes glowing with anticipation. "You, human." Your words in the transport ship were amusing. "Let us see if your actions are as bold as your speech." Marcus stood up slowly, brushing dust from his uniform. "What exactly am I going to be fighting?" "A Gorvani Deathstalker," Korthvak replied with obvious satisfaction. 10 feet of muscle, claws, and hunger. It has killed 17 contestants in the past month. Your bones will make a fine addition to its collection. "Interesting," Marcus said, nodding thoughtfully. "Tell me, does it hunt by sight or smell?" The question caught Korthvak off guard. "What does it matter? You will be dead within minutes of entering the arena." "Humor me," Marcus insisted. I'm curious about alien biology. Smell, Korthvac replied after a moment. The creature is nearly blind, but it can track prey across continents by scent alone. Marcus nodded again, filing away this information. And the arena floor? Sand, rock, metal? Sand, the alien answered, becoming more suspicious. Why do you ask these questions? Just trying to get a feel for my workplace, Marcus said with a shrug. You know how it is. A Marine likes to know his terrain. Korthvac stared at him for a long moment, then turned to address all the prisoners. You will be given basic weapons before the games begin. Swords, spears, primitive projectile weapons. Nothing that could threaten the security of this facility. The creatures you face will have no such limitations. After the aliens left, the prisoners sat in stunned silence. The reality of their situation was sinking in. They would be given medieval weapons to fight against creatures that had evolved for millions of years to be perfect killers. Sarge, Rodriguez whispered. What's the plan? Marcus was quiet for several minutes, thinking. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and confident. The plan is simple. We're going to give these aliens exactly what they want. What do you mean? Sarah asked, confusion evident in her voice. They want a show, Marcus explained. They want to see humans fight and die for their entertainment. They think they know what that looks like because they've been doing this for years with other species. He paused, listening to make sure no guards were nearby. But they've never seen humans fight when they know they're going to die anyway. They've never seen what happens when you take away everything from someone who comes from a planet where the dominant species climb to the top of the food chain without claws, fangs, or armor. You're talking about winning these fights, Rodriguez said incredulously, against creatures designed to kill. I'm talking about something much more important than winning, Marcus replied. I'm talking about sending a message. These aliens think they understand warfare because they've conquered a bunch of species that fight the way they do. Honor duels and formal battles with rules and traditions. Marcus's voice grew harder, taking on the tone he used when briefing troops before a dangerous mission. But humans don't fight fair. We fight dirty. We use every advantage we can find, and when we can't find advantages, we make them. When we're outgunned, we get sneaky. When we're outnumbered, we get vicious. And when we know we're going to lose anyway, he let the sentence hang in the air for a moment. When we know we're going to lose anyway, we make sure the other guy remembers the fight for the rest of his life. The arena floor was a circle of fine red sand, approximately 200 meters across, surrounded by walls that rose 30 meters high. Thousands of alien spectators filled the seats, their excited chatter creating a cacophony of sounds that human ears weren't designed to process. Energy shields protected the audience from anything that might be thrown or launched from the fighting area below. Marcus stood at one of the arena entrances, studying the layout with a tactician's eye. The weapons rack nearby contained exactly what Korthvac had promised. Swords, spears, crossbows, and a few primitive firearms that looked like they belonged in a museum. Everything was functional but outdated by several centuries compared to modern military equipment. The other human prisoners were scattered around different entrances, each preparing to face their own opponents. Marcus could see Sarah across the arena looking terrified as she examined a crossbow. Rodriguez was nearby, testing the weight of various blades. The demolitions expert caught Marcus's eye and nodded slightly, indicating he understood the plan they had discussed the night before. The crowd fell silent as a booming voice echoed through the arena, speaking in the common galactic language that most spacefaring species understood. Marcus's translation implant converted the words automatically. Citizens of the galaxy. Today we witness the strength of the Vextai Empire as captured humans face the deadliest creatures in known space. Let the games begin. A massive gate on the opposite side of the arena began to rise with a mechanical grinding sound. Marcus selected a short sword and a crossbow, checking the weapon's condition with practiced efficiency. He had exactly 20 bolts, which would have to be enough. The Gorvani Deathstalker that emerged from the gate was everything Korthvac had promised, and worse. It moved on 6 powerful legs, each ending in claws that gouged deep furrows in the sand. Its body was covered in chitinous plates that looked thick enough to stop bullets, and its elongated head featured rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh from bone. Most disturbing were its eyes, or rather the lack of them. Where eyes should have been, there were only smooth patches of scarred flesh. The creature lifted its head and sniffed the air, immediately turning toward Marcus's location. Its movements were fluid and confident, like a predator that had never known defeat. The crowd roared its approval as the Deathstalker began to advance. Marcus didn't move. He stood perfectly still, watching the creature approach while calculating distances and timing. The Deathstalker moved faster than he had expected, crossing half the arena in seconds. When it was 50 meters away, Marcus finally acted. He raised the crossbow and fired, but not at the creature. Instead, he aimed at one of the sand-covered grates that dotted the arena floor, designed to drain away blood and water after the games. The bolt struck the metal with a sharp clang that echoed through the arena. The Deathstalker immediately changed direction, heading toward the sound. Marcus fired again, this time at a different grate on the opposite side of the arena. The creature spun around, confused by the conflicting audio signals. The alien crowd began to murmur in confusion. This wasn't how gladiatorial combat was supposed to work. The human was supposed to charge bravely toward his death, not play games with sounds and distractions. Marcus continued his strategy, firing bolt after bolt at different metal objects around the arena. Each shot sent the Deathstalker racing toward a new location, growing more agitated as it failed to find prey at the source of each sound. The creature's hunting instincts were being overwhelmed by false targets. When Marcus had only 3 bolts remaining, he made his move. The Deathstalker was on the far side of the arena, investigating another false sound. Marcus sprinted to the center and began digging in the sand with his hands, working frantically to uncover something he had spotted during his initial survey of the fighting area. His fingers found what he was looking for, a drainage pipe that ran beneath the arena floor. The cover was loose, probably damaged during a previous fight. Marcus pried it open just as the Deathstalker caught his scent and began charging toward him. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation. Finally, they would see the human torn apart as expected, but Marcus wasn't trying to hide in the pipe. Instead, he was pulling something out of it. The arena's waste disposal system was more complex than it appeared. Marcus had noticed during their arrival that the facility processed not just organic waste, but also the chemical byproducts from the energy systems that powered the shields and weapons. The drainage pipes carried a mixture that included cleaning solvents, coolant fluids, and other substances that were highly flammable when combined. Marcus pulled out a metal canister that had been part of the disposal system, its contents sloshing with liquid that reeked of industrial chemicals. He unscrewed the cap and began splashing the contents across the sand in a wide circle around himself. The Deathstalker was 20 meters away and closing fast when Marcus fired his 19th bolt. This one was different from the others. During the night, using materials from his uniform and knowledge gained from years of military training, he had modified the bolt's tip. Wrapped around the point was a small amount of phosphorus-based material he had scraped from the inside of his lighter. The bolt struck the chemical-soaked sand and exploded into flame. The entire circle around Marcus erupted in a wall of fire that reached 3 meters high. The Deathstalker skidded to a halt, its heightened sense of smell overwhelmed by the acrid smoke and chemical fumes. But Marcus wasn't finished. He had studied the creature's behavior for the past 10 minutes, learning its patterns and instincts. When the flames died down, he was no longer standing in the center of the circle. He had moved to a position where the wind carried his scent directly away from the creature. The Deathstalker, temporarily blinded by smoke and confused by the chemical odors, began searching frantically for its prey. Marcus circled around behind it, moving silently across the sand. When he was directly behind the creature, he loaded his final bolt. This one wasn't aimed at the creature's armored hide. Marcus had spent his time wisely, observing how the Deathstalker moved and where its armor plates connected. Every creature had weak points, places where flexibility required thinner protection. The bolt struck the narrow gap where the creature's head connected to its neck, sliding between armor plates to penetrate deep into vital tissue. The Deathstalker roared in pain and spun around, but the damage was done. It staggered, green blood flowing from the wound, then collapsed onto the sand. The arena fell completely silent. In all the years of gladiatorial games, no contestant had ever defeated a Gorvani Deathstalker using primitive weapons. The crowd stared in shock as Marcus walked over to the fallen creature and placed his hand on its massive head, checking to make sure it was dead. Only then did he look up at the stunned audience. He found Korthbach in the crowd, sitting in a place of honor among the other Vextai officials. The alien warrior's expression was unreadable, but his posture had changed from confident anticipation to something approaching concern. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his second cigarette. He lit it calmly, took a long drag and exhaled the smoke into the still air of the arena. Then he raised his hand toward Korthvak in a mocking salute. The message was clear. This was only the beginning. The arena floor was a circle of fine red sand, approximately 200 meters across, surrounded by walls that rose 30 meters high. Thousands of alien spectators filled the seats, their excited chatter creating a cacophony of sounds that human ears weren't designed to process. Energy shields protected the audience from anything that might be thrown or launched from the fighting area below. Marcus stood at one of the arena entrances, studying the layout with a tactician's eye. The weapons rack nearby contained exactly what Korthvak had promised: swords, spears, crossbows, and a few primitive firearms that looked like they belonged in a museum. Everything was functional but outdated by several centuries compared to modern military equipment. The other human prisoners were scattered around different entrances, each preparing to face their own opponents. Marcus could see Sarah across the arena looking terrified as she examined a crossbow. Rodriguez was nearby testing the weight of various blades. The demolitions expert caught Marcus's eye and nodded slightly, indicating he understood the plan they had discussed the night before. The crowd fell silent as a booming voice echoed through the arena, speaking in the common galactic language that most spacefaring species understood. Marcus's translation implant converted the words automatically. Citizens of the galaxy. Today we witness the strength of the Vextai Empire as captured humans face the deadliest creatures in known space. Let the games begin. A massive gate on the opposite side of the arena began to rise with a mechanical grinding sound. Marcus selected a short sword and a crossbow, checking the weapon's condition with practiced efficiency. He had exactly 20 bolts, which would have to be enough. The Gorvani Deathstalker that emerged from the gate was everything Korthvak had promised and worse. It moved on 6 powerful legs, each ending in claws that gouged deep furrows in the sand. Its body was covered in chitinous plates that looked thick enough to stop bullets, and its elongated head featured rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh from bone. Most disturbing were its eyes, or rather the lack of them. Where eyes should have been, there were only smooth patches of scarred flesh. The creature lifted its head and sniffed the air, immediately turning toward Marcus's location. Its movements were fluid and confident, like a predator that had never known defeat. The crowd roared its approval as the Deathstalker began to advance. Marcus didn't move. He stood perfectly still, watching the creature approach while calculating distances and timing. The Deathstalker moved faster than he had expected, crossing half the arena in seconds. When it was 50 meters away, Marcus finally acted. He raised the crossbow and fired, but not at the creature. Instead, he aimed at one of the sand-covered grates that dotted the arena floor, designed to drain away blood and water after the games. The bolt struck the metal with a sharp clang that echoed through the arena. The Deathstalker immediately changed direction, heading toward the sound. Marcus fired again, this time at a different grate on the opposite side of the arena. The creature spun around, confused by the conflicting audio signals. The alien crowd began to murmur in confusion. This wasn't how gladiatorial combat was supposed to work. The human was supposed to charge bravely toward his death, not play games with sounds and distractions. Marcus continued his strategy, firing bolt after bolt at different metal objects around the arena. Each shot sent the Deathstalker racing toward a new location, growing more agitated as it failed to find prey at the source of each sound. The creature's hunting instincts were being overwhelmed by false targets. When Marcus had only 3 bolts remaining, he made his move. The Deathstalker was on the far side of the arena, investigating another false sound. Marcus sprinted to the center and began digging in the sand with his hands, working frantically to uncover something he had spotted during his initial survey of the fighting area. His fingers found what he was looking for: a drainage pipe that ran beneath the arena floor. The cover was loose, probably damaged during a previous fight. Marcus pried it open just as the Deathstalker caught his scent and began charging toward him. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation. Finally, they would see the human torn apart as expected, but Marcus wasn't trying to hide in the pipe. Instead, he was pulling something out of it. The arena's waste disposal system was more complex than it appeared. Marcus had noticed during their arrival that the facility processed not just organic waste, but also the chemical byproducts from the energy systems that powered the shields and weapons. The drainage pipes carried a mixture that included cleaning solvents, coolant fluids, and other substances that were highly flammable when combined. Marcus pulled out a metal canister that had been part of the disposal system, its contents sloshing with liquid that reeked of industrial chemicals. He unscrewed the cap and began splashing the contents across the sand in a wide circle around himself. The Deathstalker was 20 meters away, and closing fast when Marcus fired his 19th bolt. This one was different from the others. During the night, using materials from his uniform and knowledge gained from years of military training, he had modified the bolt's tip. Wrapped around the point was a small amount of phosphorus-based material he had scraped from the inside of his lighter. The bolt struck the chemical-soaked sand and exploded into flame. The entire circle around Marcus erupted in a wall of fire that reached 3 meters high. The Deathstalker skidded to a halt, its heightened sense of smell overwhelmed by the acrid smoke and chemical fumes. But Marcus wasn't finished. He had studied the creature's behavior for the past 10 minutes, learning its patterns and instincts. When the flames died down, he was no longer standing in the center of the circle. He had moved to a position where the wind carried his scent directly away from the creature. The Deathstalker, temporarily blinded by smoke and confused by the chemical odors, began searching frantically for its prey. Marcus circled around behind it, moving silently across the sand. When he was directly behind the creature, he loaded his final bolt. This one wasn't aimed at the creature's armored hide. Marcus had spent his time wisely, observing how the Deathstalker moved and where its armor plates connected. Every creature had weak points, places where flexibility required thinner protection. The bolt struck the narrow gap where the creature's head connected to its neck, sliding between armor plates to penetrate deep into vital tissue. The Deathstalker roared in pain and spun around, but the damage was done. It staggered, green blood flowing from the wound, then collapsed onto the sand. The arena fell completely silent. In all the years of gladiatorial games, no contestant had ever defeated a Gorvani Deathstalker using primitive weapons. The crowd stared in shock as Marcus walked over to the fallen creature and placed his hand on its massive head, checking to make sure it was dead. Only then did he look up at the stunned audience. He found Korthvak in the crowd, sitting in a place of honor among the other Vextai officials. The alien warrior's expression was unreadable, but his posture had changed from confident anticipation to something approaching concern. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his second cigarette. He lit it calmly, took a long drag, and exhaled the smoke into the still air of the arena. Then he raised his hand toward Korthvak in a mocking salute. The message was clear: this was only the beginning. The emergency council meeting took place in the highest tower of the arena complex, a crystalline structure that rose above the red dust storms of Xerion 7. Representatives from 12 different species sat around a circular table, their various forms creating an alien parliament of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. Korthvak stood at the center, his massive frame dwarfing most of the other delegates. Behind him, holographic displays showed footage from the arena, replaying the human victories from multiple angles. The assembled officials watched in uncomfortable silence as primitive weapons defeated creatures that had terrorized their nightmares for millennia. These results are anomalous, declared Ambassador Threndok of the Crystalline Hierarchy, his translucent body pulsing with nervous energy. No species in galactic history has demonstrated such tactical adaptability with limited resources. Our xenobiological model suggests this should be impossible. The models are wrong, Korthvak replied bluntly. These humans fight like nothing we have encountered before. They do not rely on natural weapons or superior physical capabilities. They weaponize their environment and turn their opponent's strengths into weaknesses. High Counselor Vasara, representing the ancient and technologically advanced Void Watchers, leaned forward with interest. Her species had observed galactic conflicts for over 50,000 years, and she had never seen anything like the human performances. "Show us the Deathstalker encounter again," she requested, her voice carrying the authority of eons. The hologram replayed Marcus's victory in slow motion. Fesara's 6 eyes tracked every movement, analyzing each tactical decision with the wisdom of her species. "Fascinating," she murmured. The human never attempted to match the creature's physical capabilities. Instead, he systematically eliminated its advantages while maximizing his own. The acoustic deception, the chemical warfare, the precision strike to a vulnerable location. This is not instinctive behavior. This is advanced military doctrine. Exactly my concern, Korthvak said. If 23 captured humans can achieve these results in an unfamiliar environment with primitive weapons, what might their species be capable of in actual warfare? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Around the table, representatives from species that had conquered hundreds of worlds began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Perhaps we are overreacting, suggested Trade Minister Golthak of the Merchant Consortium, his bulbous head glistening with nervous perspiration. These could be exceptional individuals, elite soldiers rather than representative examples of their species. Then explain this, Korthvak said, activating another holographic display. The new footage showed intercepted communications from the human colony worlds that his forces had recently conquered. Instead of the expected scenes of defeated populations awaiting evacuation, the recordings revealed something far more disturbing. Human civilian populations were adapting to occupation with the same tactical thinking demonstrated in the arena. Agricultural workers were sabotaging supply lines using farming equipment. Construction crews were building hidden weapons caches into seemingly innocent infrastructure projects. Even children were participating in intelligence-gathering operations that would have impressed professional spies. This footage is from the outer colonies, Korthvak explained. Territories we conquered 3 months ago. The human military was defeated, their government structures dismantled, and their populations disarmed. Yet organized resistance continues to grow stronger every day. How is this possible? Demanded General Krextor of the Iron Legion. Once a population is properly subjugated, resistance should diminish over time, not increase. Because they are not fighting the way we expect, Korthvak replied. They do not form traditional military units that we can identify and destroy. Instead, they create networks of ordinary citizens who share information and resources. A farmer becomes an intelligence operative, a mechanic becomes a saboteur, a teacher becomes a recruiter for the resistance. High Counselor Vesara studied the data with growing concern. Their social structure appears to be naturally resistant to traditional conquest methods. They do not rely on centralized authority figures whose removal would cripple their organization. Worse than that, Korthvak continued, they learn from every encounter. Each tactical success is immediately shared across their networks. They adapt their methods faster than we can develop countermeasures. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Every major galactic power had built their expansion strategies around proven methods of conquest. Defeat the military, eliminate the leadership, control the population centers, and exploit the resources. It was a formula that had worked for thousands of years across hundreds of species. But humans seem to operate by different rules entirely. What do you recommend? Asked Ambassador Threndok. Korthvak activated a final holographic display. This one showing tactical projections based on human behavioral patterns observed both in the arena and in the occupied territories. If we continue our current expansion into human space, we face several possible outcomes, he said. Best case scenario, we achieve complete conquest after a prolonged campaign that costs us significantly more resources than anticipated. Worst case scenario, we find ourselves fighting an indefinite guerrilla war against a species that becomes more dangerous the longer the conflict continues. And the most likely scenario? Vesara asked. The humans develop new technologies and tactics during the extended conflict, eventually taking the war to our own territories. Based on their demonstrated adaptability, they would likely target our weaknesses while avoiding our strengths. They would turn our own superior technology against us, just as they turned the arena environment against their opponents. The chamber erupted in heated discussion. Some delegates argued for immediate withdrawal from human space, while others insisted that appearing weak would invite aggression from other species. The debate continued for hours with no clear consensus emerging. Finally, High Counselor Vesara called for silence. There is another consideration, she said, her ancient voice carrying across the chamber. These humans have demonstrated capabilities that could be valuable allies rather than dangerous enemies. Their tactical thinking, adaptability, and technological innovation could benefit the entire galactic community. You suggest negotiation? Korthvak asked, surprise evident in his voice. I suggest careful evaluation of all options, Vesara replied. Perhaps it is time to learn more about this species before deciding their fate. Deep beneath the arena, Marcus sat in his cell with his remaining cigarette. listening to the vibrations that traveled through the facility's structure. Years of military service had taught him to read the subtle signs of an organization under stress. The pattern of footsteps, the frequency of communications, the changes in guard rotations, all indicators suggested that their demonstration had achieved its intended effect. The aliens were finally beginning to understand that humanity was not just another conquest waiting to happen. Sarah's voice drifted through the cell walls. "Marcus, do you think they'll let us go?" Marcus smiled as he struck his lighter, illuminating the small space with flickering flame. "Let us go?" he said, taking a slow drag from his final cigarette. "Sarah, I don't think they're going to have a choice." The rescue fleet arrived at Zarian 7 exactly 72 hours after the arena incident, emerging from hyperspace in a formation that made every alien defense system on the planet scream warnings. 12 ships materialized in perfect synchronization, their hulls bearing the distinctive markings of the United Earth Defense Force. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, studying the tactical displays with the same calm intensity that ran in her family. She was Marcus's younger sister, though she had surpassed his rank through her brilliance in naval strategy and her uncanny ability to predict enemy movements 3 steps ahead. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres from the communications station, "we're receiving multiple surrender signals from the planetary defense grid. They're requesting immediate negotiations." "How thoughtful of them," Admiral Chen replied, her voice carrying the same dry humor that Marcus was known for. "Open a channel to the arena facility. I believe they have something that belongs to us." On the planet's surface, Korthvak stood in the arena's command center, watching the human fleet position itself in orbit with growing dread. Each ship was smaller than the massive Vextai dreadnoughts, but their formation suggested tactical sophistication that made his military instincts scream warnings. "Sir," reported a nervous technician, "the human fleet is maintaining a defensive posture, but their weapons are targeting our orbital platforms with precision that suggests detailed intelligence about our defensive capabilities." "How could they know our defensive layouts?" demanded Arena Master Zixtal. "This facility is classified at the highest levels." Korthvak studied the tactical display and felt his blood chill. "They are not targeting random installations. They have identified every critical system, every weakness in our orbital defenses. They know exactly what to hit to cripple our entire planetary grid." The communication system activated, filling the command center with a clear, professional human voice. "This is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. You are currently holding 23 human citizens unlawfully detained on your facility. You have exactly 10 minutes to release them unharmed to the shuttle bay, or we will consider this an act of war against humanity." Korthvak activated the response channel. "Admiral Chen, I am Battle Commander Korthvak of the Vextai Empire. Your citizens were captured in legitimate military action during our expansion operations. They are prisoners of war, subject to the established protocols of the Galactic Warfare Convention." There was a brief pause before Admiral Chen responded, and when she did, her voice carried an edge that made every alien in the command center nervous. "Battle Commander, let me explain something about human military doctrine. When we declare something an act of war, we mean it literally. We do not make threats for negotiating purposes. We make promises about consequences." As if to emphasize her point, the human fleet adjusted its formation slightly. The movement looked minor, but Korthvak realized they had positioned themselves to target every major population center on the planet simultaneously. "Furthermore," Admiral Chen continued, "the Galactic Warfare Convention assumes that both parties are operating under traditional military principles. However, my analysis of your recent activities suggests you have been using captured personnel for gladiatorial entertainment, which violates every civilized standard of prisoner treatment." Korthvak exchanged glances with the other officials. The human admiral was clearly well informed about the arena operations, which should have been impossible. "How do you know about the gladiatorial activities?" he asked. "Because one of your prisoners is my brother," Admiral Chen replied, "and Marcus has been sending us detailed intelligence reports for the past 3 days." The command center erupted in confused voices. How could a prisoner in maximum security containment be transmitting information to a fleet in hyperspace? "That is impossible," Korthvak declared. "Your brother has been under constant surveillance in an energy-shielded containment cell. No communication in or out is possible. "Commander," Admiral Chen said, and there was something almost like amusement in her voice. "You clearly don't understand what you're dealing with. Let me have Marcus explain it to you directly." The communication channel shifted, and suddenly Marcus's familiar voice filled the command center. "Hello, Korthvak. Hope you enjoyed the show in the arena. I thought you might be interested to know how we've been chatting with the outside world." Korthvak felt his claws extend involuntarily. "This is impossible. You have been searched, monitored, and contained according to maximum security protocols." "See, that's where you made your first mistake," Marcus replied. "You assumed that human technology works the same way as everyone else's. You looked for communication devices, weapons and tools that matched your understanding of how these things should work." Marcus paused, and they could hear him lighting something, probably his last cigarette. "But you didn't look for a quantum entanglement transmitter disguised as a dental filling. You didn't check for the biometric data recorder built into my uniform fabric, using nanotechnology that's invisible to your sensors. And you definitely didn't scan for the chemical marker system we've been using to encode messages in the arena sand." The silence in the command center was deafening. "Every victory in that arena was planned," Marcus continued. "Every tactical decision was coordinated with Earth Command. We weren't just putting on a show for your entertainment. We were conducting a comprehensive intelligence gathering operation while demonstrating human military capabilities to your leadership." "The cigarettes," Korthvak said suddenly, understanding flooding through him. "You were using them as signal devices." "Among other things," Marcus confirmed. "Turns out tobacco smoke has some very interesting chemical properties when you know how to modify it. Each cigarette I lit sent specific data packets to our monitoring systems. Combat effectiveness reports, facility layouts, enemy strength assessments, tactical recommendations." Admiral Chen's voice returned to the channel. "Commander, you now have 7 minutes to release our people. I suggest you use that time wisely." Korthvak looked around the command center at the faces of aliens, who were beginning to understand that they had been systematically outmaneuvered by a species they had considered primitive. "Admiral," he said carefully, "if we release your citizens, what guarantee do we have that you will not take hostile action against our facility?" "You have my word as an officer that we will withdraw peacefully once our people are safely aboard our ships," Admiral Chen replied. "However, I should mention that this incident will be reported to the Galactic Council, along with our assessment of human military capabilities and our recommendations for future diplomatic relations." The implications were clear. Word of humanity's tactical superiority would spread throughout the galaxy, fundamentally changing the balance of power in this region of space. "And if we refuse?" Korthvak asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then you will discover why Earth has never been successfully invaded," Admiral Chen said, echoing her brother's earlier words. "You'll learn what happens when you threaten a species that has spent its entire evolutionary history fighting wars against impossible odds and winning anyway." Korthvak looked at the tactical display one more time. The human fleet remained in perfect formation, weapons powered but not yet targeted for offensive action. They were giving him a chance to avoid bloodshed, but the threat was unmistakable. "Arena Master," he said quietly, "release the human prisoners to Shuttle Bay 7, full honors escort." As the order was carried out, Korthvak couldn't help but wonder how many other species in the galaxy were about to learn the same lesson he had just received. Humanity was not just another conquest waiting to happen. They were something entirely new in the galactic community, a species that turned weakness into strength, disadvantage into opportunity, and certain defeat into impossible victory. And they had just announced their presence to the universe. 6 months after the Zarian 7 incident, the Galactic Council convened for the most significant diplomatic session in over 1,000 years. The massive assembly hall on Nexus Prime buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from over 300 species took their designated positions around the circular chamber. At the center of the hall, a single human delegation sat at a table that had been hastily added to accommodate Earth's new status as a recognized galactic power. Admiral Sarah Chen led the delegation, flanked by her brother Marcus, who now wore the insignia of a colonel, and several other military and diplomatic personnel. High Counselor Visara called the session to order, her ancient voice carrying across the vast chamber. "We gather today to address the implications of recent events involving the species known as humans, and to establish formal diplomatic relations with their governing body, The United Earth Coalition. A murmur ran through the assembly. Many of the representatives had never seen humans in person, and their reactions ranged from curiosity to barely concealed fear. Before we begin formal negotiations, Vesera continued, I believe it would be beneficial for the assembly to understand exactly what we are dealing with. Battle Commander Korthvak has prepared a comprehensive report on human military capabilities. Korthvak stood slowly, his massive frame even more intimidating in the formal chamber, but those who knew him well could see the subtle changes in his posture. The arrogant confidence that had once defined him had been replaced by something approaching respect. Honorable delegates, he began, 3 months ago, I believed I understood warfare. I had conquered 17 star systems for the Vextai Empire, defeated the military forces of 6 different species, and never lost a single major engagement. He paused, looking directly at Marcus. I was wrong about everything. The chamber fell silent. Korthvak was known throughout the galaxy as one of the most successful military commanders of his generation. His admission carried significant weight. The humans do not fight the way we understand fighting, he continued. They do not rely on superior firepower, advanced technology, or overwhelming numbers. Instead, they weaponize unpredictability itself. Holographic displays activated around the chamber, showing footage from various human colonies that had been attacked by alien forces over the past 6 months. The scenes were unlike anything in recorded galactic military history. Observe, Korthvak said. When the crystalline hierarchy attempted to establish mining operations on the human colony of New Terra, they encountered what appeared to be standard civilian resistance. The colonists had no military units, no heavy weapons, and no formal defensive structures. The footage showed crystal-based alien miners working peacefully for several weeks before everything went wrong simultaneously. Mining equipment malfunctioned in ways that created spectacular chain reactions. Transportation systems failed at precisely the moments that would cause maximum disruption. Environmental controls began producing atmospheric conditions that were harmless to humans, but toxic to the crystalline aliens. What initially appeared to be a series of unfortunate accidents was revealed to be a coordinated campaign of technological sabotage executed by farmers, teachers, and shopkeepers, Korthvak explained. They turned the mining operation's own technology against it, forcing a complete withdrawal without firing a single shot. Ambassador Threndok of the crystalline hierarchy shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The New Terra incident had cost his government billions of credits and seriously damaged their reputation for military efficiency. But this is just one example, Korthvak continued. Every species that has attempted to establish dominance over human territories has encountered similar results. The humans adapt to each opponent, learning their weaknesses and developing specific countermeasures. The displays showed a new set of footage, this time from the Merchant Consortium's attempt to establish trade monopolies in human space. The aliens had expected standard economic warfare involving tariffs, trade restrictions, and market manipulation. Instead, they found themselves competing against a species that treated commerce like guerrilla warfare. Human traders used unconventional strategies that violated every established principle of galactic economics, but somehow generated massive profits. They created market conditions that shouldn't have been possible according to traditional economic models. The humans do not simply adapt, Korthvak said. They evolve their methods in real time during the conflict itself. Each engagement teaches them new lessons that they immediately apply across their entire civilization. General Krextor of the Iron Legion stood up, his metallic exoskeleton reflecting the chamber's lights. Battle Commander, are you suggesting that this species represents a threat to established galactic order? I am suggesting, Korthvak replied, that this species represents something entirely new. They are not just another military power to be negotiated with or conquered. They are a paradigm shift. Marcus stood up from the human delegation table, drawing all attention to himself. He looked completely at ease despite being surrounded by hundreds of alien representatives, many of whom commanded fleets that could destroy planets. If I may, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I think there might be some misunderstanding about human intentions. Vesera gestured for him to continue. You're all talking about us like we're some kind of military threat that needs to be contained or defeated, Marcus said. But that's not what we want at all. He walked to the center of the chamber, positioning himself where everyone could see him clearly. We didn't ask for any of this. We were perfectly happy exploring our own solar system and minding our own business. You came to us.
You attacked our colonies, captured our people,
and tried to turn us into entertainment for your gladiatorial games. Marcus's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the words. Everything you've seen us do, we did in self-defense. The tactical innovations, the unconventional strategies, the refusal to fight by your rules. That's just what happens when you corner a species that has spent its entire history fighting for survival on a planet that was actively trying to kill us. He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with delegates from multiple species. You want to know what humans really want? We want to be left alone to develop in peace. We want to trade with civilizations that treat us as equals. And we want to make sure that what happened to our people on Zirian 7 never happens again to anyone. Marcus paused, letting his words sink in. But if you insist on treating us as enemies, then you're going to discover that humans are very, very good at giving people exactly what they ask for. The chamber erupted in discussion as delegates conferred with their advisors and each other. The human position was clear. They preferred peace but were prepared for war, and their recent demonstrations suggested they would be formidable opponents. Admiral Chen stood and activated a holographic display of her own. The United Earth Coalition proposes the following framework. For galactic relations, she announced. First, immediate cessation of all hostile activities against human territories and citizens. Second, establishment of formal diplomatic and trade relations based on mutual respect and equality. Third, creation of joint committees to address conflicts through negotiation rather than military action. She paused, looking around the chamber. In exchange, we offer our technological innovations, our tactical expertise, and our commitment to defending not just human interests, but the interests of any species that faces oppression or aggression. And if these terms are rejected, asked Trade Minister Golthak nervously. Marcus answered with a slight smile. Then you'll find out why, after millions of years of evolution, the most dangerous predator on Earth was never the one with the biggest claws or the sharpest teeth. He lit his final cigarette, took a long drag, and exhaled the smoke toward the chamber's ceiling. It was the one that learned how to make fire. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, a species had joined the Council not through conquest or technological superiority, but through the simple demonstration that some fights weren't worth picking. Humanity had found its place among the stars not as conquerors, but as the galaxy's reminder that even the smallest spark could start the biggest fire.